January 1815. The cannons roared along the Mississippi. British redcoats, veterans of the Napoleonic Wars, marched in perfect formation through the morning fog. Ahead of them, a ragtag American army of militia, frontiersmen, freedmen, Choctaw warriors, and pirates led by a hot-tempered general named Andrew Jackson. What followed wasn't just another skirmish. It was a clash that reshaped the young United States' identity, made Jackson a household name, and turned into one of the most lopsided victories in military history. This is the story of the Battle of New Orleans, the last great battle of the War of 1812, fought after the war was officially over. The War of 1812 was messy, controversial, and often misunderstood. Some called it America's Second War of Independence. Others called it unnecessary. Why fight? Several reasons. Britain's navy was seizing American ships and impressing sailors, forcing them into service. Trade restrictions from Britain's war with Napoleon strangled American commerce. On the frontier, native tribes resisting U.S. expansion were often armed and encouraged by British agents. Congress declared war in June 1812, narrowly. Many New England states opposed it. The U.S. military was tiny, unprepared, and poorly supplied. The war quickly became a series of disasters, failed invasions of Canada, burned cities, and confused strategies. But there were victories too. The U.S. Navy, with ships like the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, shocked the world by defeating Royal Navy vessels. Privateers harassed British shipping, and frontier battles like Horseshoe Bend in 1814 expanded U.S. control. Still, by late 1814, the U.S. was exhausted. Washington, D.C. had been burned. New Englanders grumbled about secession. Peace talks in Ghent, Belgium, dragged on. Then Britain made a bold move, seized New Orleans. New Orleans was more than a port. It was the lifeline of the Mississippi Valley. Farmers in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio relied on the river to ship goods. If Britain controlled New Orleans, it could strangle American trade, cut the U.S. in half, and potentially bargain for territory in peace negotiations. The British sent a large expeditionary force, battle-hardened from years fighting Napoleon in Europe. Their goal: capture New Orleans, secure the Mississippi, and deliver a crushing blow just as peace was being finalized. It was the perfect target, if not for one man, Andrew Jackson. Jackson was not your average general. Born poor in the Carolinas, he grew up tough, orphaned by the Revolution. As a teenager, he was slashed by a British officer for refusing to polish boots, a scar he carried for life and a grudge he never forgot. By 1812, Jackson was a lawyer, politician, and militia leader from Tennessee. He was tall, gaunt, with piercing blue eyes and a temper that could ignite faster than gunpowder. His men called him Old Hickory because he was as unbending as the hardest wood they knew. Jackson's leadership style was brutal but effective. He demanded discipline, fought alongside his men, and drove them relentlessly. In 1814, he crushed the Creek Nation at Horseshoe Bend, forcing them to cede millions of acres of land. When war loomed in New Orleans, Jackson was sent to defend the city. He arrived with a reputation for toughness and a promise: "I will protect this city or die in the attempt." When Jackson arrived in New Orleans, he didn't find a ready army. He had to build one. His force was a patchwork. U.S. Army regulars, a small corps of trained soldiers, state militias, men from Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Brave but unevenly armed, many Kentuckians showed up without rifles. Free men of color, about 500 black volunteers who offered to fight. Jackson accepted, praising their service at a time when many questioned it. Choctaw allies, native warriors who scouted, skirmished, and harassed British patrols. Jean Lafitte's pirates, yes, pirates. The Baratarians, smugglers from the swamps, struck a deal. They'd supply powder, cannon, and fighters in exchange for pardons. Jackson, pragmatic, welcomed them. Altogether, Jackson scraped together about 5,000 men to defend against a British force more than twice that size. In December 1814, the British fleet anchored off Louisiana, landing thousands of troops on the swampy coast. Veterans of campaigns in Spain, these redcoats were disciplined, confident, and well-equipped. They advanced slowly through the bayous, clashing with American patrols. On December 23rd, Jackson launched a night attack, surprising the British in their camp. Though not a decisive victory, it bought time and boosted American morale. Jackson pulled his men back to a strong defensive line at the Chalmette Plantation, just downriver from New Orleans. There, he ordered earthworks built, a mile-long wall of mud, logs, and cotton bales reinforced with artillery. Behind that wall, his ragtag army waited. The terrain favored the defenders. In front of Jackson's line stretched flat open ground. To one side, the Mississippi River. To the other, swamp and canal. The British would have to attack head-on across exposed fields. Jackson's line bristled with cannon, 24 guns of various calibers, many supplied by Lafitte's pirates. Kentucky and Tennessee riflemen manned the parapets, their long rifles far more accurate than British muskets. It was, in short, a killing zone. At dawn, the British advanced. Around 7,500 troops marched in columns, drums beating, red coats gleaming in the mist. They expected to sweep away a ragtag militia. Instead, they marched into hell. American cannons opened fire, blasting canister and grape shot into the packed ranks. Riflemen fired with deadly accuracy, dropping officers and sergeants who tried to keep order. Confusion spread when one British unit forgot the ladders and fascines needed to cross ditches. Men bunched up, stalled, and became easy targets. General Edward Pakenham, the British commander, rode forward to rally his troops, only to be struck by grape shot and mortally wounded. Other senior officers fell in quick succession. Within 2 hours, the battlefield was a slaughterhouse. British casualties soared past 2,000 dead and wounded. The Americans? Fewer than 100. It was one of the most lopsided victories in history. The British reeled in shock. These were veterans of Waterloo, defeated by a cobbled-together American army. The attempt to capture New Orleans collapsed. Within days, they withdrew to their ships. In New Orleans, celebrations erupted. Jackson was hailed as the savior of the city. Songs, parades, and newspaper headlines made him a national hero overnight. When news of the Treaty of Ghent finally arrived weeks later, Americans didn't care that the war had technically ended before the battle. The victory at New Orleans gave them pride, unity, and a sense of legitimacy on the world stage. The Battle of New Orleans left deep marks on history. Andrew Jackson became a national celebrity, eventually riding his fame to the presidency. Myth-making flourished. Songs, poems, and later pop hits like Johnny Horton's The Battle of New Orleans kept the memory alive. Unity and diversity. Jackson's army of regulars, militia, freedmen, native allies, and pirates symbolized the American melting pot in action. Military lessons, the power of defensive fortifications, artillery, and terrain. Even today, the battlefield is preserved, a reminder of the day Britain's best troops were humbled by a young nation's unlikely defenders. The Battle of New Orleans wasn't just the last major fight of the War of 1812, it was a turning point in American identity. A ragtag force led by a fiery general stood against one of the most powerful armies in the world and won. It's a reminder that sometimes history isn't about treaties signed in faraway cities. It's about the grit, determination, and unlikely alliances forged in the mud, behind cotton bales, on the banks of the Mississippi. This has been Mission Historian. Don't miss the next deep dive. Subscribe because history's battles, blunders, and legends are anything but boring.